Hi everyone, we're just waiting a couple more minutes because people are jumping in now, but we'll get underway shortly. We do have people jumping in every 1 or 2 seconds here. But look, it is 12:30, so we might get underway. So firstly, thank you everyone for giving up your lunch break to jump in on this session. Cale Wilson's my name, Managing Director of Orthotic. We've been around for about 25 years. There's a good mix of existing clients here, and there's also some new ones. So we've got lots of people joining today, which is fantastic. So this is the first of a series of educational sessions where we're going to touch on 5 or 6 prescriptions each month and go through them in some detail. Some may be focused on pathologies and conditions, others will be focused on foot types, and then we'll drill down into prescriptions that suit football boots, soccer boots, ice skates, snowboarding boots, R.M. Williams, etc. So the platform that we're going to use to do this will be our new portal and the template prescriptions that are housed within it. They're great for experienced podiatrists to get new ideas, but they're also really good for inexperienced podiatrists who need lots of new ideas. So they've been designed with research behind them, but also anecdotal evidence that suggests they are prescriptions that work quite well for these conditions, and that's based, across hundreds of thousands of custom-made orthoses. So I'll just share my screen. Sorry, bear with me for a minute. So those of you that are using us will be familiar with this, our portal. So this is the template section of the portal. At the moment, we have, I think there's just under 130 template scripts. So if we do 5 or 6 a month, it's going to take us a little while to get through all of them. They are broken down into semi-custom and custom. There's low profile, normal orthotics, and as I said, there's foot types as well as shoes and conditions. In order to search for any function, any condition, you can just go in here and go, medial knee-OA, and the medial knee-OA templates will pop up. They are designed for you guys to change them. So I'm in the lab portal at the moment, so I've got some additional functionality built in, but you do have the option in your portal, which looks like this, to create your own templates. You also have the option to go into a template. You might agree with 80% of what I say on the plantar fasciitis script today, and you can either use it as is and make the necessary changes, or you can clone it and make it your own. You might say, well, no, I don't agree with that. I want to do something else. So, but as I said at the start, this is more prescriptions that have been proven over time. So we'll start with the plantar fasciitis script. We will be going through plantar fasciitis, hallux rigidus, functional hallux rigidus, medial knee-OA, medially deviated subtalar joint axis, and plantar plate tears today, and we'll try and get through all of those in half an hour. Now, with the plantar fasciitis, I am aware that some people prefer it to be plantar fasciopathy. So there is plantar fasciopathy, and whether there's inflammation involved, they're largely going to be similar scripts anyway. So in order to use the templates, it's just a matter of clicking on the template number. in my portal, I can edit it. You guys can't edit it. You can use it or clone it, but I'm going to edit it because it just gets me into that prescription a little bit faster. So I'm going to answer all the questions at the end, if that's okay. So write your questions down or post them here, and I'll jump on them at the end after I finish the last condition. So the two things that we're trying to address with plantar fasciitis is under the tissue stress model at least, is the tensile forces, so the elongation of the plantar fascia upon pronation. And we're also trying to deal with the compression forces. So that's when the heel lands on the ground. Two things that I can't do for you in a template is determine how much rear foot correction a person needs. So that'll be determined by supination resistance and various other factors. And also the design of the orthotic may need to be changed. So if you're dealing with a pes planus foot type or a medially deviated subtalar joint axis foot type with plantar fasciitis, then the mod root probably isn't the device to go for. But it is our most common midfoot controlling device. Reason being is that it does allow for first ray function. So the part first ray fill is referencing a fill from the original cast. So no fill looks like this. It's quite parabolic. It supports the first ray. Yeah, in some instances, it will dorsiflex the first ray, which we want to do in some conditions, but in most we don't. So the part first ray fill is the most common condition. Common midfoot controlling device. So by inverting the rear foot, we're starting to deal with the tensile forces. So we're starting to shorten the distance between the plantar calcaneus and the metatarsal heads. In a closed chain environment, what's occurring as we invert the calcaneus is we're getting abduction and dorsiflexion of the talus head, and that's starting to pick up those mid-tarsal joints and the articulating joints. So that's the first step in decreasing those tensile forces. The next thing we want to do is try and drop the first ray. So again, we've got that part first ray fill, and we want to drop that first ray back down to shorten that distance between the forefoot and the heel. So we're not adding too many other intrinsic corrections with this. We are looking at a first MPJ cutout only because if we want to drop that first ray, there's benefit in having first MPJ cutout to allow that first ray to drop. We are facilitating windlass. We are dorsiflexing the first ray. We're starting to initiate high gear loading if we can transfer the weight across to the first. So giving the first as much room to drop does tend to work quite well. The shell material, we've got Poly-X in here only because it's a little bit softer than the composites and the PA11s, which may be beneficial when treating plantar fasciitis. If you want to have a look at the different materials, you can go into shell materials, pros and cons. And this compression rebound graph is quite interesting. Your composite materials are a little bit harder to flex and they bounce back a lot faster. The PA11 is even harder to flex and it bounces back pretty quickly. That Poly-X or polypropylene, which is similar to it, kind of sits in that middle. So it decelerates pronation, returns pretty quickly, but not as quickly as your composites or your PA11s. We've added an 18mm heel cup here. And again, we'll touch briefly on the low profile version of this when we're finished. And the reason we've done that is so that we can accommodate some cushioning in the heel. So the first of our addition types is a pour-on heel cushion, and that starts to deal with our other force, being our compression force upon heel strike. The forefoot valgus is important in transferring the force across to the first MPJ, and again shortening that distance and dealing with the tensile forces. So if you look at a lot of Kirby's research, it is that combination of rear foot varus and forefoot valgus to deal with that tensile forces, the elongation forces, and then looking at those slow release pour-ons and pour-ons in the heel to cushion it. So, and then we move on to covers. Again, if you can have additional cushioning and neoprene and you've got enough room in the shoe, then certainly that additional cushioning and padding will be beneficial for that plantar fasciitis. So I've got 6 to get through in a short period of time. So if you've got any questions, throw them up and I'll try and answer them at the end. The low profile version of that is really designed for when you don't have enough room in the shoe to do a 18mm heel cup. The rear foot varus and mod root are still the same, so nothing changes there. But we have introduced an intrinsic forefoot valgus, and that's to invert the forefoot again to decrease those tensile forces or elongation forces in the foot. I'll bring up quickly just an image of the orthotic. This one here. So an intrinsic forefoot varus props up the lateral column and actually bullnoses down behind the fifth ray, whereas your extended forefoot valgus, jump back into addition types. Your extended forefoot valgus, which we recommended in the other one, looks more like this one here. So either a forefoot valgus to sulcus or to, sorry, that's varus, wrong one, valgus there. So that's propping up the lateral column, supporting med heads 3, 4, 5, and then it tapers down and pushes forces medially onto the first for high gear loading and dealing with those elongation forces. All right, so next one I'm going to move on to is Hallux rigidus. So this is where we've got no first rate function, no high gear loading, no windlass or limited windlass and resupination mechanisms because of the arthritic changes in the first MPJ. And that's where the mod root design comes into play. So it's probably the only design that interferes with that windlass and resupination mechanism, because you're getting dorsiflexion of the first ray. And it's good for this condition because you don't want to engage windlass, you don't want to engage first ray function, you don't want hallux dorsiflexion. So by supporting the first ray, you're actually going some way to preventing that from happening. And then you can start to offload first MPJ. So again, it's difficult for us to give you the exact rear foot, but your rear foot correction for a pronator or an overpronated foot is generally going to be somewhere between 0 and 4 degrees with a mod root design. And really the next thing that becomes important in this script is your Morton's extension. So your Morton's extension out of the shell prevents flexion through the first MPJ. It almost acts like a little bit of a rocker bottom sole, preventing flexion through that joint. You can change it to normal and wide if you've got, say, a HAV, or if you've got, say, a plantar plate tear with a hallux rigidus. Likewise, if you're getting, dorsiflexion through the distal IP, you can go a little bit longer in those, longer or wider in those Morton's extensions. It is fairly important to move to poly-X for this orthotic. Your PA11 or your traditional 3D printed material has a short elongation of break, so your poly-X has a really long elongation of break. We're unable to fracture the materials, whereas composite has about a 5 or 6% fracture rate, PA11 about a 10% fracture rate in Morton's extension. So we will make it out of PA11 or composite, but if it breaks and if we need to remake it, we will do it out of poly-X. And really that's the main addition, but we do have in the notes, reference to the carbon fiber spring plate may complement this prescription. So mainly because the carbon fiber spring plates are exactly that. They're a spring plate, and so it actually. So I'll just stop sharing for a minute. It actually aids in propulsion forward. So it'll actually springboard the patient forward, offloading the first MPJ. That's a rigid one there, but there are the semi-rigid ones, and we do Morton's extension modifications, and as you can see, they're quite flexible. And so that becomes one of the bases for our lower profile orthotics in this category for Hallux rigidus. So if we were to go into Hallux rigidus low profile, things that we're doing is dropping the heel cup heights to create more room in the shoe. We do have a normal Morton's extension in there if you can accommodate it in the shoe. We can do those out of hook orthotics. So again, we need to have it in poly-X to prevent any fracturing. You can go to narrow, lower the heel cup. You can also go into a hook orthotic and have a Morton's extension on the hook. Alternatively, it prompts you, so things like a half medial post just to decrease the bulk. Sorry, guys, Tegan just reminded me that I wasn't sharing my screen, so my apologies there. So, sorry, I'll go back up here. There is the option there to have the Morton's extension in a thinner material, maybe a hook or a narrow device with a lower heel cup and a half medial post. But in the notes here, it does prompt you to consider a custom Orthotic carbon fiber spring plate instead of a Morton's extension. So you can just use a normal orthotic over the top of it, and then you've got your carbon fiber spring plates in a Morton's extension, which is about 0.7 of a millimeter thick. And I'll just bring up the mod root design and the orthotic just for you to have a look at it. So this one here, you can see we're quite full in the orthotic anteriorly. So we're starting to elevate the first MPJ, which means we're not trying to engage windlass. We're not trying to, facilitate first rate function or resupinate early. And then you've got your Morton's extension sitting underneath the first MPJ, normally at a sulcus length, but by putting a carbon fiber spring plate underneath it, you're knocking out about 3 millimeters, which can be the difference in sort of business shoes and dress shoes. So just something to consider. All right, so we'll move on to functional Hallux rigidus. So this is where we've got normal MPJ mobility, I suppose, in a non-weight bearing scenario. But when the patient weight bears, we ended up with limited first rate function, no high gear loading, no windlass, unless we free up the first ray. So this script is all about how do we free up the first ray and take the weight off it. And the first thing we look at doing, it works well anecdotally, is just to start increasing the rear foot correction. So there was, I'm just going to bring up this photo here. So there was a study done more than 10 years ago where they mapped out plantar or dorsal grade forces on the plantar surface of the foot, and they mapped out tolerances. And so the plantar surface of the foot, or the area that could take the most dorsal grade force, was distal fifth ray, followed by plantar heel cuboid, and then sub-met heads. The least area of tolerance was actually that medial border. So these two areas here could tolerate less dorsal grade force. And so what can we do within an orthotic in the heel, in the forefoot, and even along the lateral border to, I guess, lift the arch, where it's going to be well tolerated. And one of them is by inverting the rear foot. Again, you get abduction and dorsiflexion of the talus head, picks up the articulating joints, the mid-tarsal joints, and it starts to raise the arch. So that's one of the things we do. And if we can raise the arch without putting too much pressure in the arch, then we start to free up first ray. Again, mod root with a part first ray fill. So for those that are new to Orthotic, we do run sessions on designs, or you can book in a personal webinar where we go through designs. But the part first ray fill is essentially wiping away underneath the first ray. So we're inverting the rear foot, supporting mid-tarsals, and we really want that first ray to start to drop and free up. So that's why we've chosen that design and that rear foot. We can add a medial heel skyve. Again, we're getting more calcaneal inversion, which helps lift mid-tarsal joints. And then we're moving down into shell materials. There's no real reason to go for Poly-X or PA11, or you go for composite if you want the thinnest material. But what starts to become important is our addition types here. So the first one we look at is a reverse Morton's extension. And we look at doing it out of a firm EVA, and 3, 4, 5 mil will be good. And the reason we do that is we want that first ray to drop as much as we can. The reason we do it out of a firm EVA is that if we're trying to get biomechanical change, if we're trying to support an area of the foot, we want to go for firmer EVA. If we're trying to cushion it or pad it, you'd go a little bit softer. So I'll just drill down into what that Morton's extension looks like. Most people know what a Morton's extension, reverse Morton's extension looks like, but you can drill down in our website and have a look at the blend lines, but you'll see it blends off the shell. It's really there to support med heads 2 to 5, and then we'll blend it off distally into the toe box. So you're elevating metatarsal heads 2 to 5. You've got a sharp drop off there for the first ray to drop 2, 3, 4 mil. Again, we can guide you on that, but you'll need to give the exact measurements based on clinically what you're seeing, whether that patient has a fixed plantar flex first or mobile or what have you. The other thing to consider in this instance is a Cluffy's wedge. So a Cluffy's wedge is a small toe prop underneath the hallux. So down here. So it looks like that. So it blends up. The hallux sits here. And so hallux dorsiflexion is the beginning of resupination. So it's part of the windlass mechanism. You need for the first ray to drop, you need the hallux to dorsiflex. So that Cluffy's wedge, it can just be 2 mil, just initiates that resupination earlier. So the forefoot of this orthotic, you'd have a reverse Morton's there to prop up 2, 3, 4, and 5. You're allowing the first ray to drop, but you're also initiating that windlass and resupination a little bit earlier. So it's more common just to have the reverse Morton's extension, but just consider the Cluffy's wedge there as an option. Again, we're looking at the firmer EVAs because we're trying to support and create change as opposed to cushion an area of the foot. Getting into covers, again, that's up to you with regards to what that patient needs. In the low profile version of this, we have stopped at the met heads. You might be dealing with dress shoes or limited space in the toe box. So we try and build everything that we've just spoken about into the orthotic shell. And so, again, everything else is the same in relation to rear foot and midfoot design. We start to lower the heel cups just to create more space. But then the addition we look at then is a 2 to 5 step. So we don't have the room in the toe box to support the met heads. So the 2 to 5 step is basically a reverse Morton's extension, but it finishes at the end of the shell. So it looks like that. So it's blends up to full thickness. So you've actually got a drop off at the end of the shell. So you're supporting 2 to 5 metatarsals, allowing that first ray to drop. So you've got a drop off here. So you're allowing that first ray to drop. You just don't have enough room in the toe box to continue that pad on. All right, running over time, we're halfway through. I've only got through 3 conditions in 20 minutes, so I'll try and go a little bit faster. Okay, so moving on to medial knee-away. Oops. Medial knee-away. So what we're trying to... Oops. Okay, so we're trying to pronate the foot here in order to open up the medial compartment of the knee, and we're also trying to cushion it. So my go-to, because it's far from an exact science, is to start off with a 0 degree moderate part first ray fill, again, because we're trying to pronate, we're trying to push the foot medially. You want the first ray to be able to drop. The reason we're not doing any rear foot valgus correction here is because if you have the room in the shoe, I think you're better off doing a full-length valgus wedge underneath the orthotic from heel to toe. So we go for a lower arch because we're not worried about pronation. We're not trying to correct that. In fact, we're trying to encourage it. I've put in here a couple of small valgus forces just for you to consider. So cuboid notch is a valgus force. Lateral heel skive is a valgus force. Lateral calf grind is a valgus force. And these are all things that become more prevalent in a low profile version of this orthotic. Poly X is important because you're essentially pronating the foot and you want to do it slowly. You don't want to block up the foot. So if we go back into pros and cons, we want that as the force increases, we want that orthotic to give and we want it to return slowly. We don't want to be blocking that pronation, which your PA11s and composites tend to do more. Lateral heel post, again, we're not worried about the medial side. We don't want to fight the valgus forces with a medial heel post. Full length poron and soft EVA have been chosen. So soft EVA at 3 mil thick and 3 mil poron, because part of the research suggests we want to cushion the foot, and that's why you should be looking at neutral, stable, sort of cushioned footwear to go with it. And then this 5 degree full-length valgus wedge under the orthotic from heel to toe using medium density EVA. So we've dropped a density in the EVA for this in order to provide some cushioning underfoot, and we've got the 5 degree full-length valgus wedge. Now, the good thing about this prescription is that because it's not an exact science, the patient might be, feel 60% better. You can add 2 or 3 or 4 mil additional EVA on the lateral side to open up that medial compartment more. Likewise, if it's too much, you can grind a little bit off it. So it's quite a versatile orthotic, albeit with that thick wedge underneath the lateral side of the whole orthotic, it does take up a little bit of room. And that's where the low profile one comes into play. We're basically doing everything that we did as far as valgus forces, but we're doing it intrinsically in the shell. So we're starting off with a 5 degree rear foot valgus. We're adding an intrinsic 5 degree forefoot valgus. So the intrinsic valgus props up the lateral column of the foot and ball noses down behind the 5th MPJ. So we're getting the valgus in there. We're just not carrying it all the way through into the toe box because it's not going to work in the shoes the patient has chosen to wear. And then again, poly X because we're decelerating pronation. Lower heel cup because we want a low profile device, still a lateral heel post. And then whatever cushioning you can get into the shoe. So I've left it as a full length with the cushioning in there, but if you can't get all that cushioning in there, you may need to decrease it. Okay, number 5. So medially deviated subtalar joint axis. Again, you'll find this under a number of different templates. So if you do pes planus, you'll find some version of that. Most of your medially deviated subtalar joint axis foot types are quite flat, and we've got in there medially deviated subtalar joint axis and severe. And the difference is that there's varying levels of a medially deviated subtalar joint axis. And so what we're going to start off with this one, is a 20-degree varus inverted design. So for those people new to Orthotic, your inverted designs are loosely based around treating a medially deviated subtalar joint axis foot type. People refer to a sort of a neutral, a lateral, or a medially deviated subtalar joint axis, but there are varying degrees of them. If we use the example of, posterior lateral calc, the axis coming out, anterior to the navicular, then the inverted device is fine. If I jump into rear foot. So looking at this picture, so the inverted device will peak at subtalar talo. You want to get all your support and posterior to that axis. Anything lateral to that axis is going to be a pronatory force upon ground reaction, and it's going to tip you on that axis and pronate you. And that's why we don't look at the midfoot controlling devices, because they do tend to cross that axis. And so again, we might look at 3D print or poly-X, depending on whether you're trying to decelerate that pronation during mid-stance, or whether you're trying to sort of block it a little bit. The orthotic design, if I quickly can go back into that, the reason it drops away so quickly is that we're trying to get all our support medial lateral, so it's all in medial calc there. The foot is going to pronate mid to late stance. You can try putting an extended forefoot varus on there, but essentially that foot type is going to try and pronate. If you're too full here, you will cause irritation, rubbing, blistering. So the more parabolic an orthotic is, the stronger that shape is. The straighter it is, the more it's going to bottom out and collapse. And essentially we want that within our inverted devices. So the only difference between that one and the severe one is that the severe is when you've got a more medially deviated axis, foot's completely flat on the floor, navicular's on the floor, and we move to what we call a true inverted orthotic, which basically takes the high point of the orthotic to medial calc. So you can see there. In fact, I might bring up these images here. So this one here is your inverted. It peaks subtalar talo, drops away pretty quickly. All of your support is in that medial. This is about a 20 degrees, so all of your support is medial calc there. If we move across to a true inverted orthotic, which is this one here, we're essentially taking that high point back there. So it's all about rear foot varus correction. Everything is there. And then after early heel strike, as they get into mid stance, that foot type wants to pronate, let it pronate, decelerate it. And then that tends to be the best way to control that foot, both in a standing position and throughout gait. I'm running a little bit over, so I might just quickly touch on plantar plate tears, and then I'll answer questions. So as you type in plantar, you got plantar fasciitis, plantar flexed. So just keep typing and it will come up. So we've got plantar plate tears for second and third met head. So there's a number of things we look at. Again, we can't give you the exact rear foot or the right design. It's going to be foot type dependent. But once you've determined that, I want to talk about the plantar plate tear modification here, which is a tick box. There is no tick box for a third plantar plate tear modification, but you just put it in the notes, and essentially it's the same thing underneath the third met head. And if we bring this up, essentially what it is, it's a mini Morton's extension underneath the second met head. So this orthotic here almost looks like a first MPJ cutout, but the orthotic would normally finish there. And so what we've done is run an extension underneath the second met head and then come back. If I bring up this one here, so this might make a bit more sense. So the orthotic would normally finish where that white area is, and then we've run an extension out the front there. What that does is it sits underneath the metatarsal head. Now you might put a met dome behind it or something like that to help lift it up. But it acts as like a splint, Morton's extension. It prevents flexion through that joint during propulsion. So everything else is as a normal orthotic would be. And then what's here is a U-shaped cutout for the second toe. Now it's not in our addition types, so you need to add it into the notes. But it's for the second toe, not the met head. So one of the ways that we treat a plantar plate tear is by doing a figure 8 taping to drop the second toe to lift the second met head up. Within the orthotic, we're lifting the second metatarsal with, say, a small met dome. We're splinting it with a second plantar plate tear modification. And then what the U-shaped cutout would look like is this here, but instead of offloading the metatarsal head, it would start distal to the metatarsal head, and it would be essentially a hole for the second toe to sit in. So if you did that figure 8 taping, you'd actually be dropping it into a hole. Anecdotally, the plantar plate tear tends to work really well about 80% of the time, and doesn't work about 20% of the time. So, but you're always better off to start off with it. You can easily grind that off with a grinder, or we can do it for you. You're back to a normal orthotic, and you can pad it or what have you. But I would recommend starting with it because it does work well most of the time. Now we can also, so the third plantar plate tear is essentially the same orthotic, but we just shift that extension underneath the third. We have done some where we've run it under second and third. It's also one of the reasons people select a wide Morton's extension. So I'll just show you what that is like. I can find it. Where is it? Sorry, Morton's extension here. So you've got a normal and wide. So some people use it when they've got first MPJO, first MPJOA, Hallux rigidus, Hallux limitus, and a plantar plate tear. So you can actually run that splint across both of them. From a low profile perspective, I would probably recommend you look at using one of the carbon fiber spring plates. So if I go into that quickly, go into this is our educational website, carbon fiber spring plates, and look at our custom ones. So these are just examples of our custom shaping on the carbon fiber spring plates. But I did grab one here today. So that we've just done a second plantar plate tear modification on this. So an orthotic would normally finish there. We've just taken a normal carbon fiber spring plate and we've modified it. The area in white is the extension there. So you could do an orthotic, whether it be full length or met length to there, and then you're splinting that second metatarsal, so you're actually preventing flexion through it while you do your other padding and offloading around it. That last session was a little bit quick because I was trying to do it in half an hour. I got it done in 40 minutes. So my apologies for running late on that. I'll just jump into the Q&A section and see if there is any. Are you concerned about going too hard at the rear foot valgus if the eversion is restricted? Generally, more neutral cable in respect to medial knee away. Look, medial, and that's why I like the first script with the medial knee away. You're starting off with a 0-degree rear foot and you're putting a valgus wedge under it. You can always grind it back. The research suggests a 5-degree wedge works well with cushioning, which is why that's in there. Again, when you do it intrinsically, you're a little bit stuck. You do an intrinsic rear foot valgus, forefoot valgus. There's ways of getting it out, but if you've done it in a rigid shell, you've kind of got to grind it out, heat adjust it. If you can start with that neutral shell, and you can bring it all the way back to 0, and you can keep going up to 10. It's just a little bit bulky. When do you add a forefoot valgus intrinsically versus adding it as an addition as you articulated, or combining the two? Sorry, I've got a small screen here. What helps you make the decision clinically? So I prefer an extended forefoot valgus. You get a longer lever arm. You got the met head sitting underneath it. I think it controls the foot better if you're trying to high gear load, if you're trying to push people back onto the first, resupinate windlass. The longer you can get that lever, in my opinion, the better it's going to work. The only reason you drop back into intrinsic, in my opinion, is when you don't have the room in the toe box to do it. You can combine the two, so you could do like a 3 or 4 mil intrinsic with a 3 or 4 mil extrinsic, and that'll just run seamlessly off the end of it. But I personally think it works better as an extrinsic addition. We don't love putting additions on. They're time consuming. We've got to add all these things on for $5. But I think it's a better device. So use intrinsic when you've got less room in the shoe. Use extrinsic when you've got the room. Were there any other questions? Feel free to throw them up anonymously. They were the only two. All right, so what we'll do, keep an eye out. We'll run this monthly while people are interested in the topics that we're putting out there. Might be on shoes, might be on foot types, might be on conditions. Might drill down into cycling or skiing or stuff like that. So we'll put that out from time to time. Keep an eye on it, and yeah, feel free to join us. So thank you all for your time, much appreciated. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll hang around till the last people have left just in case there's some late questions.